Hello and welcome to the Mary Grace Show. I am Mary Grace, the voice of sanity to help you navigate politics, culture, wellness, faith, and world events. And I have with me today my good friend Sam Faddis. This is another episode of Spy Talk with Sam the Spy. And I would say there is no better time to have a conversation with Sam, who is a retired senior CIA operator, among other things. We're celebrating the 1 month mark of President Trump's second term in office, 47. And we're also looking at tons and tons of disclosures that Elon Musk and the Doge team are finding that have a lot of direct relation to your former line of work. So I think we're going to have no shortage of things to talk about. Welcome back to the show, Sam. It's great to see you.
It is great to be here.
Well, so where should we start? Um, well, last time we talked, we were hoping and praying and believing that there would be a transition and a swearing in. So we're 30 days out from that. Today is the 20th of February, 2025.
Yeah.
Give us just maybe a 30,000-foot view of how you think things are going and what you see happening. Um, and then let's take it from there.
So, I mean, as you noted, we're all 30 days in. So
Yeah.
you're taking over the federal government and making massive changes, and as much ground as has been covered, obviously there's a lot more ground that has to be covered. But what's my first reaction? Wow! I mean, they are moving at tremendous speed. They're making good on campaign promises. They are radically uh, altering the landscape in Washington, D.C., they being Trump and Elon and the Doge guys, but really the whole team, everybody, all the appointees. And keep in mind that most of these guys, like, for instance, Kennedy, are just barely coming online, right? They were just approved. So, you hardly had time to even sit down in a chair. So you ain't seen nothing
Mhm.
yet. What we're talking about is a complete we're talking about a political revolution, right? I mean, it is obviously a peaceful revolution, as it should be, but this is we have been on a certain trajectory since FDR, at least, and that the pace of that change has gathered. I mean, it's gathered speed. The pace has increased in recent decades, but this whole idea about a bigger, more intrusive, more expensive government, literally since the New
Hmm.
Deal, right? So we are now seeing that the counter
Yeah.
revolution, I guess, is what I would say, and this is a complete reimagining and remaking of the government. And I think I suspect you would say as well, taking it back in the direction, it should go. In other words, heading back toward the original conception of the founding
Federalism.
fathers. A much
Mhm.
Precisely, federalism, a much smaller, leaner, less intrusive, less expensive government, and much more control at the local level, but also just a lot more individual freedom. So
Yeah.
so far,
Yeah.
so good. Obviously, a lot of work to be done.
Well, speaking of individual freedom,
I'm sorry, but I lost sound. I can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me. You are frozen on my end. I lost sound first, and now all I have is a static picture. Anybody out there in the ether, can you tell me if you can still hear me? Yeah, I've got nothing but frozen feed from her side, frozen image, and just before she froze, her sound died. I know she was wrestling with some technical issues with her system. Okay, so you guys can hear me, so we'll just which yeah, I cannot hear her, and all I've got is, I'm sure, the same frozen image. Her sound went off and her lips were moving for a few seconds after that, as I think she was attempting to figure out what was going on, and then she froze, and that's what we've got. Okay, let me try to contact her independent of this and see if she's sorting it out on her end and get some advice as to whether she wants me to stay on or what. Okay. She's advising that she has had an internet failure at her end. Her internet went down. So it's not just this software, it is some kind of glitch in her internet. And now she's back.
Let's see if we can get this to work. Hold on just a second. Let me see.
I did some juggling for a while.
Okay, so apparently none of my sound equipment is going to work with this arrangement. So we're just going to use the computer. And I apologize in advance if you can hear me typing on the keyboard, guys, because that's what happens when all my gear goes out. But we're going to keep going because we're not going to let this slow us down.
You can
I
hear
can
me
hear
fine,
you
yes?
fine. Yes. Yeah. This is
Roger. Okay. Your sound
okay.
is
Good.
great
It's
on my
just
end.
everything's coming through the speakers and whatnot.
I
But
gotcha.
we'll do our best.
I gotcha.
So I don't. Yeah. Who knows why that isn't working? But yeah, the internet went out. I'm tethered to the phone, and so just so everybody knows that this is it. We may or may not have a great connection, but we'll do our best. Okay. Back to our
Okay.
conversation. I'm going to go
Right.
off screen for just a second. I'm going to let Sam keep talking. I'm going to get some headsets so we can have a little better sound here. And we're going to keep going. This is the Mary Grace Show. I've got Sam with me, Sam the Spy. And it's just business as usual here, bringing freedom to the masses. I'll be right back.
That's right. Okay. This is when I should have brought Homer, the dog, on, because then I can entertain you guys with that. Listen, I'll put out a plug here since I'm using a few minutes while Mary Grace band-aids things back together. I think everything that we see so far, keep in mind we're 30 days in, at the DC level is really encouraging. What I'm going to say to you guys is what I tell everybody here in Pennsylvania as we're working with the Patriot Movement, what you guys have probably heard me say a whole bunch of times. What Donald Trump and the folks around him are accomplishing in DC, I think, is incredibly encouraging and incredibly positive. We should never lose sight of the fact that we got into this mess as a country. By that, I mean an out of control government and all of this. We got into this mess because we stopped being involved in our government. So as encouraged as we are by what's happening in DC, please do not go back to the mode of, okay, Trump's got it, so I can climb back on the couch and start eating Cheetos again and check out. That a lot of work to be done, and he and the rest of the team in DC cannot do it alone. So please do not stack arms, as they would say in the military, and walk away and think these guys have got it. I can just chill now. If anything, intensify your work. There's a lot of ground to be covered. I know in Pennsylvania, we still got a lot of work to do at the state level. Anyway, that was my public service announcement while you were.
That's great. Thank you.
I should have brought Homer. No. If I'd known I was going to have to do this, I would have brought Homer.
Well,
and we could do tricks
if it happens again, we'll definitely get Homer on. Hopefully it won't happen. But I I was listening to everything you said, and I agree. I fully agree. We have a lot of fights at the state level, especially because the enemy doesn't sleep, and they will take advantage of any opportunity to sneak in under the wire. And that's what we see
Yep.
happening at the state level. For example, with the abortion issue, many states have gotten they're jumping on what I think has already happened in Colorado, which is that they are codifying the right to abortion into the Constitution.
Mhm.
And once they get it there, then it's like it's unchallengeable, irreversible, which is a big deal. And so be aware of that, be aware of what's happening at the legislative level in your state, because that's a really big issue that they're kind of sneaking in while people are focusing on what's happening at the national level. Now, we don't typically focus here on the show with what I call hyper local state level issues, but this is really, it's a nationwide issue, and it also is something that brings us around to exactly what we're looking at with this transition from a big government model to a state run federalist model. The abortion issue is a perfect example of that. When Roe v. Wade was reversed and turned back to the states, it wasn't abolished. The responsibility for making these decisions was put back to the state level, which is exactly what our founders envisioned and put into the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And so this is like, I couldn't have teed it up better because it's a perfect example of what we're talking about. When something like this gets denationalized, that doesn't make it go away. It makes it go to your local and state level. And so wake up, look at what's happening in your state. Yes, it's exciting that they're finding all of these things, that there's disclosure in what has been going on. That's wonderful. But the things that we're seeing aren't just disappearing. Education, transportation, all of these things that President Trump is attacking to remove them from federal jurisdiction or to limit severely the federal jurisdiction, they're not disappearing. They're actually putting the responsibility back on you, the citizen of your state. I'm so glad you brought this up, Sam. It's really a critical part of what we're going through
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Well, as an example, and then I know you want to get back to where we were
Sure.
headed, but Planned Parenthood just launched a nationwide effort with a huge amount of money behind it to get school board members elected. So that's a national organization, Planned Parenthood. Their agenda is clear. We all
Yeah.
know what their agenda is. And they are now funding with huge amounts of money in a nationwide organization getting people elected school board. So you're talking hyper local. I mean, that's as local
Yeah.
as you can get. They're going right down to the school boards to stack every school board in the country with folks who will then push their agenda. And that's, so I don't care where you are. I mean, I'm sitting up on the side of a mountain about 2,000 feet up, pretty much New York, or as Mary Grace said earlier, she thinks I'm living in Alaska or Canada at this
You're
point, given the weather.
secretly
But
in Canada.
the point is, this is a pretty rural area, right? This is the Fortress of Solitude here. I mean, there's in all directions. Right here, this is happening in our school board in a red county in a very rural area. So I don't care where you are, you're going to have to fight this right on your own doorstep.
Yeah, that's what they do. And one of the things that we have found is, we're getting disclosure. This leads us to the federal money that is going into all sorts of programs under the guise of USAID, and that is not aid. It is U.S. Agency for International Development. But somehow, the American taxpayers, it has been found through DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, it's been found that American taxpayers have been funding and footing the bill for our own demise. Meaning that all of these agencies, such as Planned Parenthood, that all of these agencies are actually being funded through their front organizations, such as Planned Parenthood, so called nonprofits, and so called NGOs. That's the ultimate irony, non governmental organizations, which are literally being funded by government money. And so called charities, the Lutherans, the Catholic charities, all of these things that are active right here in America on our soil. And I think I want to take some time to go into this revelation and these disclosures, especially from the point of view of somebody who is former CIA. What we have found out, if anyone has listened to Mike Benz, he has been doing a good job of explaining. He was on Tucker Carlson. He gave a speech a little while back at Hillsdale College. He explained the relationship between the State Department, the CIA, and the USAID. That sort of, I don't even know if I want to call it symbiotic, more like parasitic relationship, where the necessity for statecraft exists. For example, the State Department exists, at least on paper, to advance the interest of the U.S. around the world. That's what the State Department does. It was part of the founding of this country. That is one of the agencies that was put in place by our founders. But it was only one of three. And now we have 17 three-letter agencies, plus a bunch of agencies that were just kind of pulled out of nowhere. But the point is, going back to State Department exists to advance the interests of the U.S. CIA was created with the intention of, I guess, being the kind of the muscle behind that on foreign soil. And then the way Mike Benz describes it is that USAID is the friendly face of the dirty work that CIA can't legally do, or that Americans wouldn't tolerate if they knew that it was happening. That's sort of a summary of the way that he describes those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a pretty good summary?
Yeah, I guess I mean, I have to say that, look, I spent 20 years undercover in CIA. Before that, I was a U.S. Army officer, active in reserve for what, I don't know, 8 years, something like that. And then another decade after I left CIA, as you know, mostly building and running training classes. I mean, I essentially taught virtually every agency in the federal government tradecraft. In other words, how to run operations downrange. Ran those courses, whether every military counterintelligence service, worked with FBI and DIA and the guys that haul nuclear weapons around the country for DOE. Okay, that's not like hooray for Sam. That's just, that's 30 years, pushing 40 years, I guess, by this point, of federal service and being involved in national security. There are a lot of things that are being revealed about USAID that are complete revelations to me. That I mean, that they're completely off the chain, that they've been out of control, that we're wasting a lot of money, that we're pursuing objectives that there's no consensus for. And that is not a revelation to me. The specific details of things that they're involved in, I'm learning as I read the press. And one of the things people need to understand about the intelligence community, look, I had a top secret clearance. I guess I still have a top secret clearance from CIA. and access to SCI, which is sensitive compartmented information. So we're talking, I mean, look, whether we're talking signals intelligence or imagery, in other words, satellite images or human sources, the top clearance you can get, plus a Q clearance on top of that, which is the details of how a nuclear weapon actually works, all that kind of junk. But the intelligence community doesn't work like you go into CIA, you walk through the front door, and then there's just a big room and all the files are accessible and you wander around and you grab a hold of everything. The real principle is, okay, you're cleared TS, yada, yada. Now you are compartmented, meaning you are shown what they determine you need to know to do your job. In other words, if I'm sitting on the ground in Iraqi Kurdistan, as I was in 2002, trying to overthrow Saddam Hussein, I'm not reading the files on Moscow Station. I'm not reading the traffic out of Bangkok. And I'm not reading even stuff necessarily in Iraq if they decide I don't need to see it. And obviously it's their decision. So what I want, I throw that out just so people, lay people who have no reason to understand it, to be familiar with this, understand the capacity of the federal government to run operations, whether it's CIA, USAID, other places, and limit the number of folks who are actually in the loop on what the hell is going on. And that is a powerful thing. It is sometimes necessary, but I think it is obvious that it can be abused, right? What it means is it gives you the opportunity to do all kinds of junk, and you just say it's classified, to use the Hollywood term, and nobody gets to ask you questions. USAID used to be part of the department. In its original incarnation, it was a relatively small part of State Department before it became USAID. And its job was essentially to push information positive about the United States. Very limited charter. And then it morphed over the course of my career into USAID and became this monster. So, pushing, doing all sorts of stuff that the average American is not only like, that's a waste of money, but like, I don't even agree with that. Why is that our objective? Why are we funding transgender surgeries in Guatemala? What? We don't even agree that transgender surgery is a thing. I think this is actually a form of mental illness. Why are we paying for this? In terms of your description of CIA, I mean, CIA has two different functions, if you will. First of all, it has no function on U.S. soil. I'm not disputing that there haven't been people who have broken that rule. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it exists to conduct foreign intelligence operations, meaning operations outside the United States to collect intelligence on foreign adversaries. It has no legitimate function by law as law enforcement anywhere, and it has no function inside the United States. Now, again, don't misunderstand me, anybody listen to this, not me saying nobody's ever done that. I'm telling you, if they've done it, it is illegal and it is completely contrary to the creation. I mean, basically, CIA was built so we would never suffer another Pearl Harbor. That's its core function, the acquisition of intelligence abroad to protect Americans so they can sleep well in their beds at night. It has a separate, more limited covert action function. So what's the simple definition of that? I don't know, overthrowing a foreign government or funding a guerrilla force abroad where the United States doesn't want to do it through DOD. We're going to do it under the radar, plausible deniability, all that junk. By law, none of that happens, that covert action function, without a specific authorization. If you've watched the Hollywood movies, they always refer to it as a finding. That is the correct term. The President of the United States has to sign a finding. He has to sign a piece of paper and authorize CIA to undertake covert action. So when we went in to overthrow Saddam Hussein, as you well know, I was part of that. We had a specific finding from the President of the United States that says you have the authority to do this. And I'm not only the authority, but I am directing you to do that. So keep in mind, if you're in CIA and you're doing that, and the president didn't sign a finding, again, you're breaking the law. So when USAID is undertaking what amounts to covert action, manipulating governments, doing stuff, funding things, to begin with, we have gone completely around the clear statute that directs how covert action is conducted by the United States. Somewhere in there, maybe I answered part of your question. I don't know. I'll shut up now and let you
No, I think
follow up.
that's helpful. And I guess, when the first time you ever came on the show, my question for you was like, why should we even listen to you? Because you're one of the three-letter
Yeah,
agencies. And even at that time,
right.
the trust level in our government was very low. I would say that it's gone down
Yeah,
significantly in the past month.
yeah, I agree.
And so, you have proven time and time again that, you are one of the people who actually loves our country and is team freedom. And so with that in mind, I did want to ask you, now that we know, uh, well, let me get into some of the nuances. Some of the nuances, I think, are, I mean, you could have an entire, lecture and discussion series on the nuances of the role of
Mhm.
USAID, the connection between USAID, State Department, and CIA. And that is something that I'm pretty sure Mike Benz spends a lot of time thinking about. Because
Right,
there
right.
is sort of an existential crisis going on in America when it comes to our role as a domestic power, but also as an international power, as a world
Hmm.
power, as the so-called the quote leader of the free world. And with that in
Hmm.
mind, I'm going to get a little philosophical here. One of the things that we have heard Mike Benz talk about, and I'm referring to him because he has been really front and center in exposing and
Hmm.
explaining a lot of what USAID has been doing. Um, and but one of the things that he talks about is the um, the line between statecraft, the advancing U.S. interests abroad,
Hmm.
and the question of why. Like, at what point, where do you draw the line? And at what point is
Hmm.
it appropriate even to advance US interest in a given
Hmm.
territory or country? And I'll give you an example. When it comes to regime change, this is something that most people would understand that our nation has had a very real part in regime change all around the world for a minimum the past 50 years, if not longer. And so
Yes.
where do we draw that line between, somebody deciding for some reason, whether it's for trade, for diplomat, for peace, to keep another nation out of that area? Uh, so,
Hmm.
establishing diplomatic dominance in an area, that type of thing. Where do we like what's the line that we as the United States can cross and should be willing to accept? Um, how much of the world's babysitter and decision maker should we be? That's a huge question. But as as an intelligence operator,
Okay, people, for the next 3 hours, you will listen to me attempt to answer that question.
it's a big one.
No,
It's a
I'm
big
kidding.
one. I know. And
I think it's not just a big one, Mary Grace. It is one of the it's one of the central questions. I mean, it's a question that doesn't get asked, hasn't been asked, and yet it is at the heart of this. I mean, let's talk about military action just as a piece of that. Let's stop talking about covert action. You know, we have the capacity to invade another country and topple its government. Okay. Am I an advocate of a very strong national defense? Yeah, 100%. And retaining that capability. I am. because you have that capability doesn't answer the question you just asked. Like, when do we do that? And when is it justified? And think about the price to be paid, and you know how many lives will be ended, how many guys are going to come home broken. By the way, these wars are not fought in some training area that was set aside where we just cleared all the people out and now the combatants have at it, right? Which is horrifying enough, because you got most of the people that do the dying and all these things are 20
Yeah.
somethings, right? 21,
Yeah.
22. They're at the beginning of their lives. They're fought in the middle of cities, right? And I don't, and lots of innocent people die in the midst of this when you're firing your artillery and dropping your bomb. I don't care how careful you are, and I don't mean that to like I'm callous. It's like, just stop, man. I mean, should you be careful? Yes. You can't bomb a city and fire artillery in a city and occupy a city filled with civilians and tell me with a straight face that you're not going to kill people who were completely unintended and didn't do anything
Right.
except get out and go about their
Right.
lives. So that's not me saying you should be allowed to kill them, forget the law of war. I'm just saying, accept that, man. If you decided we're going into Baghdad, a whole bunch of the people that are going to die in Baghdad today are not Iraqi Republican Guard, and they're not American soldiers. They're just Iraqi civilians who, by the way, hated Saddam more than we hated Saddam. So that's who you're killing. So that covert action, the same thing. Okay, you're going to topple a government. Okay, and then what? You got rid of Muammar Gaddafi. Okay, he's a scumbag. I don't care that Muammar Gaddafi's dead. He was a scumbag and a sponsor of terrorism and trying to get nuclear weapons. The world's a better place. Is Libya a better place because we got rid of Muammar Gaddafi? Because the real question is, what the hell happens the day after? Because basically we broke the place, and then it is still a wreck. It's still a shambles. I mean, they got open market, open air slave markets in parts of Libya now.
Yeah.
So there ought to be, the way this is supposed to function, I think, is you exercise a lot of restraint and think very deep thoughts. And before you get some cool plan about overthrowing a government or invading or any of this other stuff, you ought to envision, be able to define precisely why. And as Trump would say, why from the standpoint of the American people, because that's who's paying the price. Those are the guys in the uniforms that are going to die. They're the people that are paying the bill for all of this and dealing with the consequence. Why is it necessary for us to do that? I think this whole discussion that you've kicked off here has been completely absent from a whole bunch of decisions that successive U.S. governments have made for decades. I mean, and if you expand it to USAID and not talk specifically about covert action, why is passing out condoms in Central Africa? Why are we doing that at all? And why are the American taxpayers paying for that? Why are we doing, I mean, anyway, I think that entire conversation, which is a difficult one to have, is just simply not taking place.
Right.
And it's not even like the Congress is deciding this. I mean, come on. When we're talking about USAID is just making these decisions internally.
Sure. Yeah. And yeah.
No consultation. The people's representatives are not involved. Congressmen are not involved. The people you sent to DC to run the government are not involved. A bunch of unelected bureaucrats with their own political agendas and their own, or ideas about gender fluidity and this kind of crap are making these decisions. So, I mean, it's a tough conversation. The worst part is we haven't even been having the conversation.
Right. Yeah. So where do these decisions originate, and who is responsible for reflecting on the impact that these decisions will have, um, on the American people, on the pocketbooks of the American people, and also generationally? How do these decisions affect the local people, the international balance of politics, of trade. So it's a big geopolitical decision for somebody to come in and make a decision like this. You mentioned national defense. The role of the president is to safeguard the national defense. That's one of
Yes.
his primary responsibilities. And so, for example, right now we know that China has been encroaching on the whole world with their Belt and Road Initiative, and they have a huge presence in Latin America, in Mexico, in the Panama Canal, in ostensibly Greenland or up around there. Uh,
Mhm.
and one thing about Greenland, I will say that there's a lot more in Greenland than people think. It is
Mhm.
not just a vast Arctic wasteland. It
Right.
actually there's a ton of natural resources, and there are research facilities there that have been there. U.S. research facilities, foreign research facilities. It's a prime piece of real estate, and people kind of laugh about it because we don't think about it, but what Trump is doing right now strategically in renaming the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, it's a dig to the left because they renamed everything. So he's like, we can
Mhm.
do that too. But it's also a geopolitical strategy of defense. And I'm getting somewhere with this. I'm on a little another tangent, but I'm going to land this plane in a second, which is there's always a question of when you make a decision like this, are you making that decision in the interest of US defense, whether it's
Mhm.
defending us on trade, on geopolitical grounds, um, culturally, whatever it is, that where who with whom does the ultimate decision lie?
Mhm.
When you are even protecting borders, but also even thinking about expanding borders.
Mhm.
Because let's face it, when we do a regime change, that is a de facto expansion of the US empire,
Mhm.
whether we're calling it that on its face or not. And there's
Mhm.
a lot of people who are kind of alarmed, um, about Trump's stance on Greenland or the Gulf of America. They find it alarming because they think that it's heading toward a counterpart to the European Union,
Mhm.
annexing Canada, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. Again, we're getting into some deep philosophical territory, but I think it's important because these questions have not been put to the people at large for generations, decades.
Yeah, I agree. We have a government that has stopped being accountable to us in any way and pursues objectives, whether we're talking domestically or abroad, um, without really any consultation with the American people. And also, just there's an element of sometimes, well, we can, therefore we're going to do it, as opposed to, okay, man, well, maybe we can, but that didn't answer the question. The question was, you can't. Sorry, I've got silencing notifications from people who won't stop bothering me. Um,
You're
okay, we can't.
popular.
We can't, or I don't know. Hopefully, they're not bill collectors. We can. Okay, cool. That's great. Should we? And what? How in the end does whatever it is we're proposing benefit the American people? Because I thought the whole purpose of the frigging government was to benefit the people, which it who elected you. That's who you work for, right? If you're holding an office, you work for the people. So if you're going to do this, whatever the heck it is, USAID, DOD, CIA, how will we be better off tomorrow? And I think
Hmm.
I always come back to look what there are often no easy answers, but you have to have that process, and frankly, it needs to be deliberate and it needs to be characterized by restraint, right? Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly, carry a big stick. Everybody wants to just talk about the big stick part and make it seem like Teddy was the guy just running around the world trying to get into conflicts and all this stuff. Okay, there's a reason why the speak softly part was the first piece of that, right? Because he wasn't actually in a hurry to get into conflicts with people. You know, he's looking for that. We've just kind of dispensed with this. I mean, this whole really important issue of why are we doing this and should we be doing it? People talk about the greatest generation. I think I've said this to you before. I probably repeat myself all the time. But anyway, you know, the greatest generation, we won World War II. We defeated Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, yada, yada. Okay, fantastic. My father was a member of that generation, won the Silver Star at Okinawa. All credit where credit's due. I'm not diminishing that. You know, World War II started in 1939 formally. I mean, the world was already in conflict. Okay, we entered the war after the Japanese bombed us in Pearl Harbor 2 years later, over 2 years later. The whole world was going up in flames. You know what the American people were saying? Most of them were saying, it's not our fight, stay out of it. The moment that Hitler went into Poland, we didn't go marching in the streets and say, we have to go to war in Europe. We were saying, why should we send our boys to die there? And for 2
Especially after
years,
World War One.
especially after World War One. Well, look, in World War One, our troops arrived in 1917. That's when we entered the war. The war started 3 years earlier in 1914. For 3 years, they were fighting in Europe, and the doctrine of the United States was, it ain't our fight, people. Where our guys are not, our boys are not going to go to France and die because the Europeans are having a fight. Now, my point here is let's remember how we used to look at this. I'm not arguing for isolationism. I'm not saying that was necessarily the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's just we weren't always in this mode of it's our job to intervene everywhere and solve everybody's fight. Very much to the contrary. And when we did get into fights, we were really clear-eyed. I mean, keep in mind World War II. We defeated Nazi Germany. We defeated Imperial Japan, Mussolini's Italy. We allied ourselves with the Soviet Union. We allied ourselves with Stalin, and we sent him equipment and supplies to fight. Why? Did we not know who Stalin was? He's a friggin' monster. We understood what the USSR was because it was like, we'll deal with that later. Right now, we got to make the really hard, clear-eyed decisions that are benefiting the American people. We got to win this first war before we can worry about the Russians. So, you know, whatever happened to that kind of, we answer to the American people and let's make really sober judgments thing. It seems like it's just, you know, it's floated away.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I want to pivot a little bit to Donald Trump because
Okay.
something that you just said was interesting. Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly and carry a big stick. Okay, so now we have a president who tweets, and we have a president who is very vocal about his intentions. And on the other hand, though, he's made it very clear that he doesn't always broadcast what he's doing, especially militarily.
Yep.
And so he probably isn't as loud as people think he is. But when it comes to his style of governance, uh, what are your thoughts about, for example, he throws out a sweeping statement about tariffs across the board. That's a big one. We're gonna make Canada the 51st state. We're gonna annex. We're gonna buy Greenland. Things like that. Um, really bold statements that could potentially light a powder keg.
Yep.
What do you see as the difference? I mean, he's effective. We have seen that he's effective. What is he doing differently? Like, how do you think it works? Why do you think his approach works?
Well, look, I think he has a genius for going to the heart of the matter, whereas other people just get caught up in the status quo and the idea of incremental change and very limited possibilities for what we can accomplish. He sees immediately, like I say, the heart of the matter. He goes to its essence. So I give you an example, Gaza, right? And this whole business about moving the Palestinians out and redeveloping the place. What I think Trump sees instinctively, and I don't mean to suggest he's not also very sharp, I just mean like his mind works like this, is
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can't go back to any version of the status quo that existed before Hamas's attack on Israel and not ultimately end up in exactly the same place. So in other words, if you leave Hamas in charge, I don't care what peace deal you sign. If those guys remain in charge and those people remain there, and basically we don't fundamentally change the situation, you can start a clock on when the next attack will happen. We will be right back here
Hmm.
in a year, 2 years, 5 years. I don't know. We could argue about that, but the point is, you're just repeating the same thing over and over. You're going to get exactly the same result. We must fundamentally remake the reality on the ground. And then I think he deliberately says things that are provocative to kind of break the eggs and signal that we are not accepting the status quo. So he talks about redeveloping Gaza. I don't think Donald Trump really thinks that we're going to take over Gaza and we personally are going to run the place. What he's saying is we're one way or the other, when this is all done, there will be a completely different reality on the ground.
Right.
And then okay, then the protracted negotiation takes place and the discussion takes place. And I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but I think there's a very good chance that when it's all done, Gaza will in fact not settle back into it. Hamas will not be in charge. And a lot of those people won't be there. And we will have broken that cycle with Greenland. To what extent he really thinks we're going to buy Greenland, I don't know. I think what he is saying is there's a massive amount of resources, and we're not just going to accept the fact that they're somehow walled off from us. Already
Or that China is just going to waltz in.
or they're going to let China just steal this stuff. The same thing with the Panamanians and the canal, right? To what extent he intends or ever intended to invade Panama and physically take back the canal. What he was saying to the Panamanians is, there's a deal. You're not living up to the deal. We're not going to accept the Chinese controlling this place. And I do actually, by the way, as the president of the United States, have the military capacity anytime I want to press a button, and I will guarantee you in 24 hours, we will retake the canal, because that's a reality and we can do it. So what did he just do? He completely changed the negotiation. The Panamanians, it's like all bets are off. And what did they start doing? All of a sudden, they start making concessions and making movement and so forth. To what extent did he ever really want to invade Panama? I'm guessing he didn't really ever really want to press the button and say, we're going to invade Panama. But what he was saying is, we're going to, negotiation is all about leverage. I have said to you before, in interrogating somebody, the first thing I always tell somebody if we got him in custody and we're interrogating them is, unless you make yourself useful to me, you're going to stay here in this cage for the rest of your life. I don't care. I can walk out the door right now. I'm a free man. I can go. In other words, all of the leverage is on my side. I'm not begging you for anything. You don't want to talk to me? Cool. I'll go grab lunch and the door will close on your cell. That's the real way you question somebody. It's all about leverage. He is a master of doing that, of remaking the situation. And he is doing it very, very effectively and very, very quickly.
Good. It's interesting. And I'm glad, speaking of leverage, I'm glad that you brought the Middle East into the conversation. I know that's your area of expertise, but this is a good time. Surprisingly, nobody's really talking about the Abraham Accords. And when I first heard President Trump float the idea of developing Gaza, that was the first thing that came to mind, because obviously, clearly, he wants the Middle Eastern nations to engage in stronger diplomatic relations. He wants to take them out of war. He wants to get them to stop killing each other. and to engage in diplomatic relations. He knows that it's almost impossible to get them to agree on religious terms.
Right.
That's just not going to happen. But the work that Jared Kushner did in the Middle East, leading up to the 2020 culmination of what is known as the Abraham Accords, that was pivotal in
Mm.
bringing business and diplomatic relations to a better place in the Middle East. Unfortunately, that was stalled by what happened when with the regime change in America in
Right.
2021, the color revolution. Uh, and so now, to me, it's only natural that Trump would be bringing that back. And he's not using the word Abraham Accords, but what do you think about that? Do you think that this is kind of picking back up on the Abraham Accords and getting these Middle Eastern leaders to take charge of their nation or of that region, um,
Yeah.
responsibly?
Yeah, I do. And look, so I'm glad you brought up the Abraham Accords, because when Trump left office, right, we the Middle East was really on the cusp of a complete, I was going to say realignment. I don't even know what the right word. I mean, a brand new reality. This region that had been a source of conflict for generations, and just one cycle of violence after another, it really looked like, good Lord, we're seeing the end of that. We're seeing
Mhm.
these folks sitting down and making peace, and all of a sudden the future is bright. And like with so many things, the Biden administration managed to destroy all of that very quickly. But I think we have the capacity to pick that up. I think that's exactly what we're
Mhm.
doing. There are some difficult specific concrete things that are going to be
Mhm.
hard to deal with. For instance, Gaza, just use as an example because it's on top of my mind. I mean, the idea of getting the Gaza is, like 2 miles wide and 25 miles long at the extremity, at its greatest length. It's basically a giant refugee camp. That's before it got bombed. It's a horrible place to live. It has no natural resources, has no industry. It's a nightmare. The idea that these Palestinians are jammed in there, I mean, into this horrible perpetual existence in this nightmarish place. I mean, that's no way to go forward. They're going to be a trick getting somebody to. So on its face, the idea that a million of them go live in Jordan is an infinitely better idea, right? I mean, Jordan's a much bigger place, not a huge country, but a lot more room than
Mhm.
Gaza. It's got resources, yada 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 yada. The sense it is a Palestinian state. They should be there. Here's the problem: the Arabs hate the Palestinians. I don't care what they say in front of a frigging camera when they're all brothers and all that stuff. They talk about them in the vilest possible terms. I mean, the way the KKK might talk about black people,
Mhm.
literally. I'm not going to use the terminology, but it is incredibly derogatory. They regard them as savages, and terrorists, by the way. And even though they're defending them all of the time, they sure as heck don't want them on their own soil. So
And
that's.
this includes Egypt? This includes the
Oh
Egyptians?
my God, yes,
Or
the Egyptians too. Have you ever seen pictures of the wall between Gaza and Egypt? It makes like the wall that Trump was building on the border here look like nothing. It's like the friggin' modern Great Wall of China along that border. They talk about them, they're dogs, they're savages. They say worse things than that. So, and they're terrorists, and they know wherever they go, they're going to bring Hamas with them. I mean, I'm talking their characterization. I'm not accusing every Palestinian of being a
Mhm.
terrorist, but that's the way they think about it. So I said this to when the King of Jordan was here. I mean, the Jords actually are very good friends of ours in the Middle East and work very
Mhm.
closely with us. Getting them to agree to take Palestinians in any sizable number on their soil, I don't know what it's going to take, but
Well,
Donald Trump is the deal
if
maker, so maybe he'll pull
NGOs
it
had
off.
their way, we would be bringing them all here, right?
Yeah, yeah, or we would just keep them there forever, and somebody would make billions of dollars off of shoveling them aid, half of which would be stolen and sold on the black market, and the rest of the money would actually be diverted to buying rockets and machine guns and crap. Is that the
This is the
wall? And yeah,
wall.
there you go.
Those
Yep,
little silver lines that you see, that's concertina wire, right?
yep,
That's
yep. That's how. That'll give you an idea what the Egyptians think of the Palestinians.
okay.
They're not inviting them in. They don't want a single one of them on their
So
soil.
borders
They
actually,
won't stop.
so
Won't stop them from standing up in front of a camera and talking about their Palestinian brothers
right.
and how much they love them and stand in solidarity with them, but they're not inviting them home.
So borders actually are a thing.
Borders. You know, it's also very funny. Who was it? Tom Homan, I guess the borders are, who said when the Pope was criticizing Trump's border policy the other day, he was like, take a look at the Vatican, man. It's surrounded by a 50
Yeah.
foot high wall. And by the way, they have the Swiss guards there. And, if you've ever been to the Vatican, the Swiss guards look really cool in their uniforms. They were originally hired as mercenaries, I think, back in the
Yeah.
1500s by
Yeah.
the Vatican. But the thing is, it's not just the dudes in the fancy costumes with the helmets. It's an actual very militarily capable, it's a military force armed with state-of-the-art weaponry. So the
Yeah.
Pope lives
Yeah.
behind a 50-foot high wall with his own army and lectures other people about
Mhm.
borders.
Yeah,
I thought
exactly.
Homan was
Yeah,
dead
and I
on.
mean, I lived in Rome, so I had frequent,
There you
contact
go.
with the Swiss guards, and everybody knows in Rome that there are Italian guards at the Vatican, and there are Swiss guards. The Italian guards are considered to be like a rent-a-cop. The Swiss guards are the badass people that you do not mess with. And they're the
That's right.
ones who are guarding the entrance of all entry points to the Vatican. The Italian guards are the ones that are like standing around in the museum and things like that once you're in the Vatican. But getting in is a whole different story. So just for what that's worth. Um,
Well, the Italian guards are spending half their time making time with the ladies
well,
outside
exactly. Yeah.
in the
And
square.
yeah,
Yeah,
and they're all yeah,
flirting with every woman that walks by. But the
right,
Swiss are all
right, right.
business.
And they're
This is why they have them there.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. So it's very interesting. I think a lot of people don't realize that. So thank you for explaining it. But it's, so going back to, I guess, international relations, statecraft, what we do as a country. I do think I'm happy that we're having this conversation today because I do think that this once we get through the initial phase, the initial um, reveal, the disclosure of what is happening with our country, with our monetary system, understanding that, understanding the theft, understanding the level of depravity and um, just deception that we've been under, betrayal, getting through those stages. The conversation has to take place of what we just talked
mhm.
about. What is America's role at home and abroad? How much responsibility does America have for policing the nation's regime and enacting regime change? What is right? What is ethical? What is our responsibility? And then where does any of that fall in the realm of national defense for this
Yep.
country? That is the president's responsibility, is to defend our nation from enemies, domestic, foreign, and domestic. And so I think these are really important questions that need to be brought up.
Absolutely.
Once we get through the shock and awe phase of getting
Yes.
the country back. And one of the things too that I've been saying is, you know, right now, the things that Trump are doing, they seem extreme in some ways, but he had to stop the bleeding because our
Yep.
country is, right now is, if you think of think of it as a medical situation, we are in a
Hmm.
level one trauma situation. We're in a critical bleeding out
Hmm.
trauma situation. And if you've ever
Yep.
been in a situation like that, some of what you see happening, some of what the EMTs or the doctors are doing can seem very scary because the interventions
Yep.
that are taking place are not always understood to the layperson. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. I think we're seeing some
Yep.
big
Yep.
interventions. And so if you get scared or frustrated, just think level 1 trauma, like stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. Everybody knows like if all the blood is gone, the patient dies. And then you deal with the
Mhm.
brain and the other systems. But if there's no blood, there's no person. Um
Right.
and so that's where we are.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think you also just have to. I mean, as time, whatever your priorities are, you're going to get those accomplished up
Yeah.
front. At some point, it will begin to get harder and harder and more difficult, and there will be more resistance. And obviously, you're also going to face midterms. And you don't know what's going to happen in the Congress, all
Mhm.
kinds of things.
Mhm.
So you got to move quickly, and people should understand there's still a tremendous amount of resistance within the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know guys working in the agency and CIA still inside talking to me about how immediately following the election they're sitting in a staff meeting and a senior CIA official, in other words, this is not two guys around the water cooler thing, this is a formal meeting, and they got one of the top guys in CIA sitting at the end of the table, and the first thing that he says out of his mouth is, I still can't believe this POS won the election. Obviously, he doesn't say POS. Um,
Yeah.
that's on the record in a formal meeting in his capacity as a senior official of the Central Intelligence Agency,
Yeah.
a guy who works directly for the President of the United States, saying that to his subordinates in a work setting.
Yeah.
That is not a private opinion he expressed at home to his wife. That's him saying that to his subordinates and setting that tone. And that kind of crap is happening all throughout the
Mhm.
federal bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So
And they've gotten
you're
away
going to
with
break
it.
that resistance. You got to move fast.
Yeah.
Yes, of course they've gotten away with it. Look at CIA when Trump won the first time, they actually they have formally told supervisors to designate crying spaces, places where people. I'm talking a formal communication that you will designate places for your employees who are still attempting to deal with the emotional trauma of Donald Trump winning in
Mhm.
2016.
Mhm.
They will have a designated space to go to till they can compose themselves, and they will be, not can be, they will be given time if they need it to go process this. This is the Central Intelligence Agency saying, if your people are having breakdowns at their computer screens because Donald Trump was elected, you need to set up a space where they can go cry and try to get their act together. That's like, I didn't make that up. That happened. And CIA is not the only place it
Mhm.
happened. It happened all throughout the federal government.
Yeah.
I give you an
Yeah.
idea. And the same, I think the response is a little less visible this time because the scope of the victory was such. But those attitudes didn't go away on the part of
Mhm.
senior folks. So they're going to be trying to fight the guerrilla war for a long time.
Interesting. Well, okay, so when it comes to reducing and firing and layoffs and things like that, there were a number who took the early buyout offer. There are people who are being laid off, getting their pink slips. Entire departments are being eliminated.
Mm-hmm.
We're hearing a lot of crying about from people who are being told they have to come back into work. So that's more rank and file. Uh, what do you well, DOJ has had a big purging, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you see happening with these types of people? Do you see this new administration coming in and getting rid of these people? I mean, this senior official, what is the likelihood that this person is going to be identified and sent packing? This is what the American people want to see. They want these people gone. It's one thing to have, 2% of the workforce cut out as a money saving operation. It's
Mhm.
a whole different thing to have this level of resistance rooted out and sent packing. That's a completely different conversation.
Yeah, well, so that's a very good question, and it remains to be seen. I mean, it. I'll use CIA as an example just because I'm closest to that organization, but it's an example only. The same applies at the Bureau, um, DOJ, any of these other places.
Hmm.
A bunch of people got to be fired. I mean, particularly senior officers. You're not going to go in and keep the same team and think you're going to somehow dictate a different result. I mean, a bunch of people got to be fired at the top, in addition to whatever buyouts and all this other general. You got to get rid of people at the top, and for a couple of reasons, because many of them deserve it, because they either were part of the problem or they just sat there on their hands while things happened. They could have resigned. They could have stood up and done the right thing anytime, but
Hmm.
they chose not to. So whether you were actively part of a coup against Donald Trump or just watched a coup occur against Donald Trump and didn't do your duty to the Constitution and the American people, bye, you're gone. So that's got to happen. On the
Hmm.
backside of that, I think, is the really hard part, because that part will, and the president authorized you to do it, you can do if you've got the moral courage to do it.
Hmm.
Now, unless you're going to say we don't need a CIA, and again, I'm using it as an example only, FBI is the same shtick. Unless you're going to say you're going to wink these organizations out of existence, now I got to actually fix it. I just swung
Yeah.
a baseball bat and broke a bunch of China and threw a bunch of guys out the window. Now I got to fix this place and retool it and make it do its job and make it not ever again do the things that it was doing that it shouldn't have been doing.
Hmm.
That's the hard part, because part of that will require people who actually know how it's going to work. I mean, the simple example, I was in the military. I come from a military family. Okay. I take over a battalion or a brigade or a warship, and it's a wreck, and it's,
Yeah.
it's failed every eval, it's failed every inspection, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So I fire the sergeant major and I fire a bunch of company commanders and I pull this guy. That's great. Now I got to actually turn that battalion or brigade or whatever we're talking about into an effective fighting force. And the only way
Hmm.
to do that is if you actually know what it's supposed to look like and how to do that. So
Mm.
after you fire those people, you're going to have to find some folks who actually know how to do this. At the Bureau, God bless Cash, who I, presume will have that job.
The
After,
vote,
after
listen, they're voting to get him out of cloture. Actually, that's going on now. The final, when that happens, then he moves to Senate. So the Senate vote is tonight.
so,
Pray, everybody. Okay.
God willing, absolutely that he's there. Okay. And walks through the door with a baseball bat. Yes, people, I'm speaking metaphorically. Don't go taking that sound clip and telling people that Sam's advocating violence down at the Bureau. The point is, after he's done breaking the China and throwing people out the windows and all of that stuff, he's actually got to turn the FBI, fix it, and get it functioning and doing its
Yeah.
job. Not the mad. In other words, we're not going to chase the old ladies who are praying outside the abortion clinic anymore. But we actually are going to, I don't know, hunt down Tren de Aragua and get him the heck out of our country. So you got to make it work again. Same at the Bureau, at the agency.
Hmm.
That to me is the trick.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
Yeah.
What I can tell you, bottom line, you can't walk into a place like CIA, replace the director, keep the rest of the guys there in senior positions in
Hmm.
place, and then think you are going to arrive at a different location. That will not
Right.
happen.
Right.
They will
Yeah.
play you. They will drag their feet. They will run you in circles. They will prevent any reform.
Yeah.
And now we talked about CIA and FBI. Imagine that we're talking actually about pretty much every federal agency in Washington, D.C. has the same problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So there definitely has to be um, a big house cleaning. And one of the things that I
Yeah.
think that is obvious is that, President Trump is much better prepared this time. I mean, do you get the
Yes.
impression, well, I don't think
Yes.
it's more than an impression because I think you know more than you can
Yes.
let on. But
Yes. He is infinitely better prepared and has way more people around him and folks that he can trust, and the lessons have been applied. Still titanic fight now.
yeah, yeah. So because but I guess my question is, to what extent has he identified a lot of these key players prior to going in? Like, in other words, I think that he has people on the inside that have remained loyal to the American people and to the cause of, the American experiment, um, who have been who have been working inside of these agencies in the interim
Mhm.
between presidents' terms so that he can come in better prepared to do what needs to be done. That he's not just now trying to discover who these people are. Would that be an accurate assessment?
I think that is accurate to a very large extent. It is also true. Um, and my hesitation here is because there are things here going on with like the transition team that I don't want to talk about. Let's put it this way, that I'm not going to talk about because it's happening confidential. Um, a lot of people have been identified, but there are also a very widespread effort underway right now where folks are being interviewed and identified. Keep in mind that we're talking thousands and thousands of people that have to be appointed. Where
Yeah.
after you're done with you're just talking a massive number of individuals, because the real work, again, to use CIA as an example, okay, that's great, you can put a director in, and none of this is intended to be a criticism of Ratcliffe or dismissing him. I'm just saying anybody takes over as director of CIA, that's cool. Now, until you get to the part where you have replaced a
Hmm.
whole tier of individuals below him, several
Hmm.
tiers, you're not making, I mean, they've changed. You can't make any. And by the way, CIA is a tiny, I mean, in DC terms, everybody talks about CIA because I guess it seems sexy. Um, it's a tiny outfit, right? I mean,
Okay. Okay.
it's a fraction of the size of the bureau. It's nothing compared to DoD. Just imagine how many people that Hedgeth has to promote to
Yeah.
appoint over there.
Yeah. Yeah. Big. I was just looking, somebody said that cash is in, and it is looking like the confirmation has gone through that he is
Okay,
our FBI
good
director.
deal. Good deal.
So you're hearing it here.
There you go.
Yes, it was posted last night that the vote was tonight, which was a little weird. So he's looks like it's all gone through. Even Mitch McConnell voted yes, which is, yeah, should have
Holy
been a
cow,
yes
that knocked
all
me over
along.
with a feather.
Yeah,
Probably because he's so
crazy.
senile, he didn't know which way he was voting. That's probably
Right. He was voting yes. He thought he was getting cash.
that's probably that is a good one. That was well done. That
So thank you. Yeah. Okay. I think Uh, oh, it's sad. Sad but true. Okay.
yeah.
Um, so this is a good place to stop. I didn't even
Okay.
stop us to do our ads. Unless if you want to stick around for a few minutes, we can. I do need to take an ad break. So it's up to you. Is
I
this a good
I
time
I
to
inf- I,
stop?
unfor- I yeah, I unfortunately got a jet
Okay.
because Gina's getting ready to vanish, and that means I'm becoming dog sitter in a moment.
I
That's
understand. I understand completely. And so we are so happy to have you on today. It's really good to have this
thank you.
conversation. Everybody loves hearing from you, and everything that you say, it's measured and intelligent and coming from a place of experience that a lot of us just don't have. So we really appreciate you being here today, and you're always welcome back on the show. Everybody, Sam Faddis, how does everybody follow you? How can they find your work and follow you?
Easiest place to find me is just to go to And Magazine, which is the magazine that Gina and I, my wife, run. andmagazine.substack.com. And by the way, for the
Perfect.
record, everybody should understand that Gina is also a retired CIA operations officer,
Yes.
and we'll see if one of these days we can coax her to get on camera. She's still, it's
I
old habits die hard. She's still
yeah.
adverse to be appearing on camera, but she's got.
Well,
But actually, I shouldn't do that because she'll end up on here and she'll start telling stories on me, and I'll probably regret that. So
Gina is a force to be reckoned with, and we're talking about Mrs. Sam the Spy for people who
yes,
don't know.
yes,
Um, and I've already issued the invitation. She knows she's welcome anytime to come on the Mary Grace show. We can just talk about whatever. We don't even have to talk about spycraft. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. Um,
the mind boggles to think what the two of you would get into. That's
oh gosh, if you're listening, Gina, you know you got my number. So yeah, that would be awesome. I would absolutely love that. That would be fantastic. And we can talk about we can have a whole series on the defense industry. Um, which would be
she will. She is a scathing critic of the
yeah,
waste in the defense industry, the abuses, the extent to which
yeah.
defense contractors get away with murder. She pulls no
Military
punches.
industrial
She
complex. I
pulls no punches
seriously.
on that. She's
Yeah. Well, we can
and
do a
by the way,
series.
for the record, folks, I mean, and not only did she serve her country for a long time downrange and you know, put her life on the line, but her family is, you know, served in the Marines, the United States Army, the Air
Yeah.
Force. Her one of her uncles was a fighter pilot flying missions into North Vietnam. So she's, they've earned the right to stand up and criticize the defense establishment because they've put their lives on the line.
Yep. Well, my microphone is open. We could
Okay.
we could talk, this
I'll
could
try to
be
talk her into it.
this could actually be the groundwork for her book that she
There
needs
you,
to write.
there you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can give her all the transcripts so she'll have her outline.
Good
Okay,
talking to you.
you
Thank you for
too.
having
Thank
me.
you, Sam. Sam the Spy, Sam Faddis. We love having you on the show, and we will have you back soon. Stick around, everybody. We want to hear from our sponsors here today. We have a lot of good companies that work with us here at the Mary Grace Show. Thank you so much, Sam. We will have you back very soon. So thank you everybody for being here. Let's take a second. Those of you who want to get more of this content, please go to marygracemedia.com and join my mailing list. That's one of the easiest ways to get notification when we have a show like this. I do send an email out before we go live. You can also find my sponsors there on the channel. We have a number of companies that are America First companies that work with us here at the Mary Grace Show. When you shop from them, we get credit, we get a little bit of an affiliate commission. They don't dictate our content at all. They simply want to partner with shows like mine that are bringing the truth to you. And so when you purchase from them, you're supporting my show. And one of our favorite affiliate partners is griddownchowdown.com. They are freeze dried US grown beef. This is grass fed, grass finished. It's not jerky, it's actual beef. And when you reconstitute it, you are making hamburger. You're making your hamburgers, tacos, spaghetti sauce, chili, whatever it is that you use ground beef for, it's right here in this little package. And people are stockpiling it for a apocalypse or whatever reason they want to. Some people are using it on a weekly basis. You can get a subscription right now if you do a 24 serving subscription of griddownchowdown.com and use promo code Mary Grace. They are sending you 4 free servings with your subscription. And that's a one-time gift. And it is good through this month. We extended it through the month of February. griddownchowdown.com, promo code Mary Grace. This is the monthly or bi-monthly subscription, and they do have some openings for the subscription so that if you place an order, you will be able to take advantage of that deal. I'm going to run a couple of our ads here, and then we will be right back to say, actually, no, I'm not going to come back. I'm just going to say bye now. I'm going to say bye. And please come back tomorrow. We have Dr. Troy Sproul with us at 11 a.m. for a live Q&A. He is our functional medicine specialist. And then on Saturday, we have one of our favorite guests coming on at 1 p.m. Eastern, and you're not going to want to miss that. Thank you for being here today. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Thank you for your great comments. Please stick around, hear from our sponsors, and we will be back tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Jordan, and this is my brother. And I'm Nace, and we're at the Grid Down Chowdown. And this is Larry, who is a local rancher that we've partnered with. Now, Larry, you've been ranching for over 4 generations, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm 3rd generation, my son's 4th generation, and I've got some grandkids that are 5th generation.
Man, that's awesome.
We've been here for quite a while, yeah.
All right, now, Larry, your cattle is grass-fed, grass-finished, and pasture-raised, just like God intended them to be.
Yes, because I want to know what's in that animal.
Right.
What it's been fed. And so the only way to do that is for us to keep it all natural, just like God has done it for years and years and years, thousands of years.
How has partnering up with us helped you and your ranch?
Well, it's allowed us to develop a market that we didn't have before, one that can get directly to the consumer, and that's great.
And just remember, more importantly, with every package that you buy, we put a salvation track in there. So from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for allowing us to do what we believe that God has us here to do. And just remember, God loves you. He really does.
Amen.
Americans spend more now than ever on healthcare, and we're sicker than almost anybody in the world. We've put our trust in a system that's completely let us down. Dr. Troy Sproul and the team at Synapse Center for Health and Healing have changed all that. They are a functional medicine clinic, and they get to the root cause of what's made you sick in the first place. Once they do that, they give you solutions to help you get out of that. This is the way that medicine was meant to be practiced, and this is what they're doing. They're changing the entire system from the inside out, one person at a time, and you could be one of those people. And so when you're working with the team at Synapse, they're giving you solutions and not just prescriptions. That's a game changer for me. When you set up a free discovery call with Synapse, you're starting on a journey of healing. You're starting on a journey of getting answers. And that's why I've partnered with them, because I want you to be healthy. I want your family to be healthy. I want you to have all of the resources that you need to steward the body and the health that God's given you. Go to officialsynapse.com and tell them Mary Grace sent you. That's Official Synapse, SYNAPSE